All right, everybody, welcome back to the Brian Escow Show. Nice to be with you. We are doing a special live episode today only because there's apparently an issue with the streaming service that I use, StreamYard, with the processing time for processing videos. I was doing a microphone test because I promised you all that I would buy a new microphone after 5 years of podcasting. It started to crackle, and I'm hoping that this sounds as good as it did in the test. But I had to do a test, about a minute long test. And when I went to listen back, I realized, damn, this minute long video isn't loading. So I didn't want to take the risk of doing a 30, 40-minute podcast and losing it, right? So I'm jumping on live. That's the only reason I'm doing it live. So nice to be with you all. A lot to get into today. A nice little agenda that I set up from last week. So I guess we should get right into it. And that would be with starting with my review of the Odyssey. Finally got to it, yes. Okay. I mean, I'm skipping this little story about a package thief in my apartment complex. I'm assuming no one wants to hear that. It's kind of a fun little neighbor drama, but okay, should I tell it really quick? Okay. So my mom sent my wife a package. Turned out it was a pair of gold earrings. She didn't want to tell us what it was for her birthday. It was my wife's birthday the other day. And my mom says, be on the lookout for the package, be on the lookout. Okay, so we finally get a text from the delivery company, and turns out my mom we live in this monstrous apartment community, and it turns out my mom had accidentally gotten two of the digits wrong out of the 5 digits in the address, right, for the unit number. And so it went to this similar but wrong unit. And we saw the picture of it, and we went to the door a couple times, and we knocked, and they didn't answer. Okay, fine. And so finally, for the third time, I know we were kind of being creeps, but for the third time that evening, this was, I think, Wednesday evening, might have actually even been Tuesday, we were saying, we'll swing by one more time with our dog, and, maybe we'll leave a note on the door. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to leave a note on the door, just like, hey, blah, blah, blah. If you get it, please, 'cause we know they had it. And we actually caught them coming in and out of the house. And so Alexa said something to the woman, and I was listening from afar. I had the dog, and I didn't really believe the lady, to be honest with you. It sounded like bullshit to me. But she said, "Oh, yeah, I got it, and I put it back in the mailroom already." Okay, well, we had looked in the mailroom, and it wasn't there. So we have this little dispute and potentially a question of integrity, but can't prove it, I guess. And they're gone. The uh, the end of the story here is that the company was kind enough to take care of my mom and at no cost send a new package to the right address. So, total mistake on my mom's part. Little drama between neighbors and a company doing the right thing. So, that's the little package thief story. Okay, back to the Odyssey review. My long-awaited Odyssey review. I swear to you, I say I'm really in the main vein of pop culture because a couple weeks before the Odyssey came out, right as the how would you call it, woke drama was building up, the narrative was building up around it. Right then, I said, "Hey, I actually recorded a video." This was when I was still in my 4 month hiatus from the podcast, and this was a couple weeks ago. And I wanted to speak to somebody, even though I didn't have the podcast back at the time. And so I recorded a video and said, just because you have a non-traditional casting choice doesn't mean the film is going to be woke. I'm going to go see it. You're damn right I'm going to go see it. Right? And it turned out that I think that ended up being the right, of course. Of course it was the right take. And so I'm a little late to finally having seen it, but it turned out I think I was on the right track there. And so here's what I have to say now having seen it. Well, first of all, my father-in-law spoiled the entire story for me. It's funny. We were out celebrating my wife's birthday, and we mentioned that we were going to see it. And I said, I don't. Now that I think about it, I don't really know the story. And he gave me a hard time. Oh, how could you not know the classics? And when he went through the whole thing, and he was the king of Ithaca. I mean, he just went through every single story. I was like, all right, man, you just ruined the entire story. But thank you very much. Now I'm going into the movie tomorrow. Why am I even going to see it? You just told me the whole story. No. So okay. It's an ancient narrative, right? And so I go in. So it was, bottom line, it was a good movie. It was very good. I stayed awake the entire time. The script was good. It was tight. It was focused. It was not woke at all. The performances were on balance very good. I can't say there was any bad performances. I'm not a huge fan of what's her name? I was about to call her Ann Coulter, Anne Hathaway. No offense, no offense. I don't know. I don't love her as an actress. She's a little bit, she's a little bit of a Matt Damon, which is ironic because he was pretty damn good. And not that he's ever bad, but he's a little bit of like a Matt. She's a little bit of like the female Matt Damon, you know. So I'm not. She wasn't. I just. I don't like her on the screen. I'm sorry, as a personality. If I'm being honest with you, and it's not personal at all. And I'm sure she's a lovely person, and she's not bad. It's just a preference thing, you know. Not in love with her as an actress. And then there are pros and cons to being an epic, is what I was thinking when I was watching it. I was like, it's so grand, and that's just the way, the story. It's so grand and it's so kind of different. It's not typical to what we're used to, that it's so zoomed out at certain points where it's hard and episodic. It's a little hard to, and he did a pretty good job actually tying it all together and keeping the flow, keeping it grounded, but nonetheless still hard to kind of keep your place and why should I care? Is this a little nonsensical? But he did a terrific job. It was very well done. But that's just the pros and cons to being an epic. There are perfectly good times where you were up close and personal with the characters and you felt the continuity of the evolution of their dynamic, and you were there and this and that. But um, just different, kind of a different scale. I mean, we heard about that when we saw how much money was being invested into the production, right? That's when, now that I think about it, a year, 2, 3 years ago, when the articles started coming out, oh, Christopher Nolan's doing the Odyssey. I guess looking back at it, yeah, this is the Odyssey. It's this story. It's the story of a guy who, a soldier, a king of Ithaca, who fights in the Trojan War, and for some reason has a really difficult time coming back, making it back to his home, and has all these misadventures and challenges with his crew, with his soul. And there are flashbacks to when he's in the Trojan War. So I guess you have a guy who's contemplating what he's done. Maybe that's what it is. Is that what it is? A guy who's done a lot of killing. He did a lot of sacking, and yeah. I'm glad. I'm kind of remembering a little bit of the movie now. Maybe he's really torn about what he did and how he did it, because remember, they snuck in the Trojan horse. So I think he's having some guilt about that potentially, and maybe that's why he's not ready to go home, because it changed him. That decision maybe changed him, and maybe he didn't feel ready or comfortable going back to the life he had, the people he loved. So anyway, yeah, it's there's a lot there. I mean, there's a lot there so it's great. It was really good, solid. Um, would I watch it again? Sure, yeah, I suppose I would. It was really good. I really have nothing negative to say about it. So good for Christopher Nolan. Wasn't woke at all. I didn't feel any explicit or overt, over the top narratives, woke narratives at all. Like I said, it didn't feel woke at all. Didn't feel preachy at all. It felt like an exploration of guilt, perhaps. And, it's a big story, and it's not Nolan's story. And so, you can take a bite out of it wherever you want to, and talk about it. So it was good. It's good that he did that. The Odyssey. Yeah, a classic Western piece of classical Western literature. Interesting. Nolan. Got a lot of shit, man. I thought Ellen Page was really good. Ellen Page was really good. So everything was good. It all worked out. Fine by me. So what I said before I saw the film was exactly right. And I'm pleased that it turned out that way. Happy to report. So that's my happy report from the Odyssey. Okay. Now, another random point here before I get into the next main point. So I'm about to get into critical race theory and the definition of it and its ongoing relevance to the current political environment. So this is the number one, the thesis topic. So that's the big juicy one. But I wrote a quick note to address before I did, which is that I love social media. I'm really into it now. Instagram, TikTok, discovering music and comedy. And I've found so many musicians and so many comedians in the last couple months and years. It's literally like one of the joys of my life to find random, new, young, in most cases, people, but not always young, who are just expressing themselves and finding an audience and having success. It's amazing. The internet, social media, it's so good in that way. And one documentary that I've been seeing a lot of the marketing for is maybe it's called Are You Happy? I'm hoping it's called Are You Happy? Because kind of what else could they call it? Because all they're doing is well, as far as I know, all they're doing is they're going around to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and asking them, Are you happy? And the answer is, then you see little clips, and of course they're going to have a nice documentary. It's so moving. The positive responses, the negative responses. It's so interesting. And I think, you know, because that's really what this podcast is all about too. Identity, morality, philosophy. What is happening? You know, the classic questions that philosophers have been asking since forever. What does it mean to be a human being? How do you become happy as a human being? Or is that even the goal? What is the goal of a human being? What is the goal of a society? What is the goal of a political organization? How should we be? This is all very interesting to me. So, Are You Happy? I'm going to be on the lookout for that documentary. And it's there's a political element too. Where are you searching for your happiness or your fulfillment? Is it in politics? Probably shouldn't be. And as we're talking about last couple of weeks with Nietzsche and the death of God and all of this, the institutions have changed. Some have crumbled, some have evolved. And where we are searching for our fulfillment is potentially not great these days. And I think potentially that's what Nietzsche was talking about. We have to figure out if we're going to even accept the death of God, which is a whole nother conversation, which I'm not saying that I do. I'm just saying I'm talking about the real world around us. And a lot of people have accepted the death of God, and we are living in a different era today. There's no doubt about it. So, as I've said before, I've always believed, I haven't always believed in God, but I should say that I was raised to always believe in God. In my teenage years, I had some years where I would have called myself maybe even an atheist, definitely an agnostic. I'm leaning much more toward believing in God. I'm not a religious guy. I don't go for the rules and stuff, but believing in God and praying, yes, often for many years now. So that's just where I am, just FYI. So, yeah, where are you searching for meaning and happiness? This is all relevant to what I'm exploring here. So, happiness, yeah. So let's get into critical race theory. The reason that, I'd stopped talking about it. It's funny. I had a podcast called Searching for Political Identity. Here's the pen. I actually had a pen. I had one pen made that is kind of cool looking at Searching for Political Identity. I started this podcast 5 years ago now, again, while studying critical race theory in my final year of law school. And I talked about it so much. Now, I don't have any delusions that people are actually listening to my podcast, but you talk about it every week for freaking 4 years, and then you post about it on Twitter every day for 4 years. And eventually you're like, all right, I got to somewhat stop talking about it. And then people will say, wait a minute, critical race theory. And then you realize really no one, despite all your efforts, really very few people know that your whole personality has basically been built around your experience studying it. And you basically do have to tell the story, find new ways and interesting ways to tell the same story over and over, at least for me at this point in my journey as a broadcaster, as a wannabe broadcaster, right? Professionally, I suppose. That aside, whether or not I actually want to become a professional broadcaster is another question, but here I am broadcasting. So I beat the critical race theory thing on its head for so long, but I come to realize that people still need to understand, if I don't constantly provide the context, then um, my whole identity, speaking of identities, online at least, and as a podcast host, becomes a little bit more unclear. So the reason I decided to talk about it again after laying off it for a little while is I saw this great clip of Ben Shapiro. He was on Bill Maher. I don't know how old it was. Sometimes you see videos and it's like they're being circulated as if they're brand new, but they're old. So I don't know when this was from. Malcolm Nance, black gentleman, black commentator. As far as I know, Malcolm Nance, he's a political commentator. He went to fight for Ukraine, I think, which is an amazing show of will and principle. That's incredible. Malcolm Nance, right? I don't know much about him, but I know he's gotten into it respectfully a few times with Ben Shapiro on Bill Maher. So this might be an old clip. But Maher asks Ben Shapiro to define critical race theory. And Shapiro goes, well, I admit I've read more critical race theory than most people because I studied it in law school. And Bill Maher goes, okay, so this is stuff that basically you and basically only 6 other people know. And I'm thinking, I'm one of the 6. No, obviously, it's more than 6. But my point here is I have latched onto this topic and been talking about it ad nauseum for a reason, because I believe it's important. There's a reason Bill Maher is hosting people about it to this very day, potentially, unless it was an old clip. It has ongoing relevance. And I happen to study it, and it feels important. It feels like I need to speak about it and flesh out my own feelings and help people do the same. Excuse me. So Ben Shapiro nailed it off the top of his head. So I wrote down exactly what he said, because if it's not broke, don't fix it. So, excuse me, 1 second. So what is it? It's the idea that racism is baked into all our institutions, and that therefore any institution that purports to be colorblind is actually a guise for racial power. Boom. Racism is baked into all institutions. Therefore, any institution that purports to be colorblind is actually a guise for racial power. Whew. Nailed it. Next bullet point that he said. Even things that are purportedly good, so long as they uphold these broader systems, such as capitalism or meritocracy, they're bad. Right? Even things that are purportedly good for race relations, like integration, like just you name it. So long as they uphold the broader systems such as capitalism and meritocracy, they're bad. And then the final point that he laid out there in his very off the top of the dome definition was extremely impressive, was that all disparity is discrimination. In this mindset, all disparity is discrimination, because how could it not be if you believe that racism is baked into all our institutions, and that if we have a colorblind institution, it's actually a guise for racial power? Well, of course, then the resulting disparity is resulting. It's resulting from the discrimination. So that is a very good definition of critical race theory. To me, it's a very troubling way to look at the contemporary society we have. I mean, there's always room for improving past injustices. Maybe there's a better way to phrase that. There's always room to look around and say, what can we make more fair, better, bring it up into contemporary standards? Because we do have a history. We do have a history of racism in the country. So it's being anti-CRT is not about denying history. It's about saying, hey, I was never ignorant of our history. I was never ignorant that slavery existed. I was never proud of slavery. What are you guys talking about? The reaction to being against CRT is, hold on. Are we studying history and learning about atrocities, which would be one thing? No, that's not what CRT is. People often say CRT is just history. It's just the real history. It's the history that's not whitewashed. No. It's saying it's an affirmative, it's a diagnosis, and it's affirmative prescription on what to do. CRT fits into a framework of 4, how would you call it, ways in which you can relate, racially. This is what I learned studying critical race theory. I wonder if Ben Shapiro learned this as well. But what I learned is that critical race theory, which, and how would I phrase critical race theory? I would say, yeah, critical race theory is the idea that our society is not objective. And so, because our society is not objective, that imposes significant and daily injustices on people who are not straight white men. If you're black, if you're Mexican, if you're gay, if you're queer, if you're this or that, living in American society, even though it's colorblind on paper since the Civil Rights Act of 1964, on paper it's colorblind, but in the streets it's not. In the streets it's still a white patriarchy. And so you better believe that people are being dealt with, people are dealing with injustices every day. That's what they call microaggressions. And I was just like, man, I don't know. I don't know if I can sign up for this, guys. I'm like liberal and I'm a huge fan of defending the underdog, but I just can't buy this. This is crazy talk. You know? Let's defend the underdog. Let's promote social justice, but the fact that, are we saying that everything is a guise for racial power and that therefore, so CRT is not only the diagnosis that everything is a guise for racial power, it's a prescription that says, okay, so what are we going to do about it? We're going to radically transform everything in the society so that we have racial equity. That's where you get equity. So our society, even though it's colorblind on paper, is not colorblind. It's not fair. Therefore, we have to radically transform it so that it is racially equitable. That is critical race theory. What I was taught, and I'm curious if Ben Shapiro was taught this as well, is that critical race theory fits into this framework. It's the third out of 4 options that you can choose from for how you want to view race relations, an extremely important topic in this country. So the first is traditionalism. The second is reformism. The third is critical race theory. And the fourth is limited separation. So traditionalism, this would be your classic, and this is the stuff I was learning that sparked, it was like, oh my gosh, I have to reevaluate my political identity. What am I going to do? Am I going to start a blog? No, that's too much work. I guess I'm going to start a podcast. That's interesting. Maybe I'll have to get on social media for the first time in my life. And that's how this all started. Next thing you know, I have a podcast called Searching for Political Identity, and I'm reflecting on what I'm learning, and I'm interviewing people from diverse backgrounds, and I'm saying, this calls for a total reevaluation. So, of my political identity. And that's what got me shifting from a lifelong Democratic voter, Obama, Hillary, and Joe, to Trump in 2024. And I continue to reflect on it. I continue to be amazed by it, honestly. But where does traditionalism? Traditionalism is the idea that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was the end-all, be-all of race relations in this country. It was the mount. It was the summit. We did it. We freaking did it, guys. Well, I say we. You did it. It got done. It's done. We are colorblind on paper now. We now have a more perfect union. A significantly more perfect union. Wow. So Republicans, mainstream Republicans, MAGA people, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, Lindsey Graham, anybody on the right side of the aisle, anybody who's not woke on the left would say that yes, we haven't been a institutionally racist country for many years now. For many years now. That's what and thank God for the Civil Rights Act. Thank God for the Civil Rights Act. Well, not everyone would say thank God for the Civil Rights Act, but the vast majority of MAGA, certainly the vast majority of people on the right would say thank God for the Civil Rights Act. Now, the people who don't say thank God for the Civil Rights Act, now we're starting to talk about the woke right, but we'll save that for another episode. So the traditionalist is proud of America, thinks the Civil Rights Act was the bee's knees, and yeehaw, and let's all live in this patchwork, God-fearing, traditional American culture where we're all one, but we're all one under the feeling that we're now one under the promise, the original promise of America. We didn't have to fundamentally change anything at all. We just had to let more people in, as was fair, as was right. So that's traditionalism. Reformism is, yeah, basically we want to get to that place where traditionalists think we are. Traditionalists think we are in an objective society. Traditionalists think we have an objective society. Critical race theorists do not think we have an objective society. Objective is colorblind. So the reformists say, yeah, we want to get to that place, but we still need to do some tinkering around the edges. So maybe a little affirmative action here, some, maybe a little bit of this here, a little bit of that here. Nothing crazy, but let's continue to use power, whether it be government or private corporations, to extend opportunities to people who are traditionally marginalized. That's just fair. That's the reformist view. And then eventually, soon, we will get to a point where that's no longer necessary. We all live in peace and harmony in America. Sorry about all this. I'm just thirsty. So you have traditionalism, you have reform. So that's all the Republicans, mostly MAGA. You have reformists, would be a lot of people in the center, some people on the left, maybe a couple of people on the right. That's also a big group. A little bit of more of a spread there potentially, though, in terms of the political aisle. And then you have critical race theory. Traditionalism, reformism, critical race theory. So traditionalism is everything's fine now. Reformism is let's keep tweaking it a little bit and then we're almost there. Critical race theory is this is a disaster. It's all wrong. It's all racist. It needs a transformation right now to the core immediately to achieve equity in society, because that's what it's all about, because it's not about anything else other than fairness for people who are living under a system that oppresses them that they didn't ask to live under. That's the argument. Then finally you have limited separation. So I've told the story several times. That professor in my class told us the story that Derek Bell, one of the creators of critical race theory, on his deathbed was lamenting that critical race theory didn't take, the general population in America didn't embrace it. For it to be successful, to achieve this radical change, a critical mass of white society, in his view, in their view, needed to accept it, and then from inside they could make the change. And it didn't happen, despite all the matriculation through the education systems and corporations and certain aspects of government life. There was not a total embrace of critical race theory at the most fundamental levels. And so he lamented that it failed. And so as I was told, I don't know if he crafted the plan on his deathbed or anything like that, but he began to turn to this idea called limited separation, which to me just puts my jaw on the floor, and because it sounds a lot like segregation, a return to segregation, and it almost is, but it isn't. Basically, it's a call for a return to segregation, except that any of these institutions, fire stations, schools, businesses, government buildings, whatever, private businesses, like I said, neighborhoods, it's not that they have to be all black. If we're using African American black as the primary example, you could do this with any group, but it's not that the rule is they have to all be all black. The rule is they have to be at least 51% black, because if they're at least 51% black, this is my language, the black soul, if you will continue to manifest in the institution, and therefore black people will feel at home there, and they'll feel, it makes perfect sense, right? But I was just like, is this what I'm learning in law school? After I got done studying con law and the Equal Protection Clause, and I was already in love with America, and I rediscovered it. I was falling deeper in love with America, and I decided to take these classes on the way out to see what all the fuss is about. And you're telling me that we should be considering like a return to, it's not a return to segregation, but that, the integration was bad. I mean, it's, It was really troubling. I remember recording videos, selfies in the parking lot of law school, going home, walking to my car, like, did I really just hear that? So, yes, all of this got me starting to question my political identity and led me here to you today. So that's the definition of critical race theory. That's what it is. So why is it relevant today? Well, it's relevant to me because DeSantis was arguing about it while he was running for president. When I began to start talking about it, Ted Cruz was arguing about it, not respectfully debating it with Justice Jackson as she was being recommended for the Supreme Court. It was happening while I was learning, and I said, "Wow, this is a perfect opportunity for me to get in on the conversation." But it's not about me, of course. It's about the conversation and about what's going on in the nation. And the nation is being racked with this issue. And the soul of the nation. Yes, Biden, you're right. We are going through a battle of the soul of our nation. An ongoing echoes of the Civil War. It hasn't stopped. Is it going to take reparations? Is it going to take the disintegration of the nation into something else, into little hives? The black nation, the white. Is it? Hopefully not. God willing. One of my goals is to play a very small role in making sure that doesn't happen. I'm fighting for the reasonable middle, right? Hey, we love America. It's a patchwork, a traditional. I consider myself a traditionalist, maybe a reformist, but I believe in America so much and I love it so much. I don't want to see anything bad happen to it. And this issue has been dominating our politics for years and years and years now. And I do believe it's made its way into the classrooms. If it would be one thing if it was just taught in law school, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I believe many, many, many people have been, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but taught to believe that America is a corrupt, evil place. Forget Trump, by the way. Just America in general is a corrupt, evil place. And there's a lot of Marxist elements into the whole entire thing. We don't even need to get into that right now. But so what's the relevance? Well, maybe I will a little bit when I say what's the relevance. So for some reason, this issue has gotten national coverage. And you could say, oh, it's dying out and you're trying to keep it alive, Brian. I don't know. I don't think so. I truly believe that we have a nation of people, some of which have been taught to believe that capitalism is bad. And when I say capitalism, I'm not just talking about pure capitalism. I mean, I'd love to go into the realm of ideas and talk about pure capitalism and libertarianism and economics. I'd love to do that. But in the real world, I'm talking about practical capitalism, with reasonable reforms and regulations that protect consumers and people and, protect from abuse. And so long as it doesn't stifle innovation, but I believe in innovation. I believe in, corporations. I believe in, the American dream. I believe in work. I believe in effort, in conquering the frontier. I love that. So I believe truly that you have many people in this nation who have been trained to feel that all of that is bad. All of that is a result of a bad system, and it should be fixed and can be fixed and must be fixed through government means. And I think we are in an ideological civil war, I would say. I do. I guess that's the point. We're in an ideological civil war. Are we always in an ideological civil war? I don't know. But I'm paying attention to politics now, and that's my assessment. So you have a guy like Trump, and the next part of the agenda here is to talk about Trump's character. Someone asked me, do you really support him? And I've addressed this many times before, but it's a really good question. How could you support him with all of the grifting, and how could you support him with all of the things he says and the way he treats people and this and that? I'll say this. Let's start with the negatives. He's venal. Did I use that word properly? I think I did. He's vindictive. He's petty. He lies all the time. He cheats at golf. He throws around the word traitor, which I really don't like. That's probably the one that bothers me the most. He he lives like in the newspaper. Like he lives like Bill Maher said there are two Trumps. And I believe that. I believe there's a Trump when you see him and you get to know him and you're around him, and that there's a Trump. He's so performative. He's been in public life for so long. He's so committed to being performative. He's so egotistical that he operates on a level that most people don't comprehend. And the way I justify supporting him is, I don't think he's a bad guy. I actually think he's a good guy. I justify the lies and the bad behavior as a sort of coping mechanism that this animal has, this political animal now has. And I'll tell you, damn if now before I go on to the positives, the reflecting pool thing. Look, I'm not here to like cover the news extremely diligently, but to the extent that the truth is that, if he really believed in his heart that there was some vandalism, then okay, maybe it's okay that he's still giving Gene Pereira a hard time. But I would just much rather like the president to say, you know what? Good for you, Janine Pereira. You followed the facts, and this is what we find out. But he can't do that. I mean, he can't do that. So I don't like the reflecting pool scandal at all, this whole thing. It's completely illustrative of all of his worst qualities. And I don't support that part of Trump, but that's obvious. It's like, you got to say, guys, hold on. Can we be adults here in a second? My whole thing has been to say, I don't need a fifth grade teacher, someone with the morals of a fifth grade teacher as president, or the disposition, because I don't believe his morals are that bad. Although I'm not defending them. I'm saying I'm not condemning him as the most immoral person I've ever seen. But he operates in a way that is unethical on a public level, and I justify that by saying this is a way he operates. I would tell my kids if I had them, hopefully I will in the near future, look, Trump's a different guy. He's not the kind of guy you want to emulate in certain respects, but there are certain things about him that you should emulate. So maybe let's talk about that. Yes, he's an animal, a wounded animal, and you could just see it, and you don't have to be a therapist to diagnose him. It's like, oh, there's something there, but damn if there isn't a strength to that. There is a willingness to live and fight there that is impressive. A psychological strength. I'm not saying that as like a cult member. I'm just saying, look at that. Pretty strong. The positives. So I'll have to do this off the top of the head because I didn't jot anything down. But the positives to Trump are that what you say is to justify it. He's operating in a certain way. And when you do that, when you justify some of his bad behavior in the public setting, you're able to look past it and say, are the outcomes typically good? Now let's divorce this from the immediate political environment. Let's divorce this from the immediate war situation and the economy. I'm not here to make an episode on right now. And, maybe I should. Maybe you can criticize that and say, Brian, that's what you should be doing. But I'm just saying in general, Trump's persona and why people like me have come to support him in general and even have a little faith in him is that, if you're able to look past that, you go, are there things to admire? Well, there's a strength there. There's a love of America. Sure, he's selfish, and sure, he's lining his pockets, but is he doing anything at scale from a governance perspective that is outrageous, that is outside the lines of what I signed up for, which is bold, a little bit of a chaos agent? He tries things. He's inventive. You just see, this guy his wheels are always turning. It's like, where do these ideas come from? He's always talking to people. He's always working the phone. The appeal to Trump is that he's a crazy but good-hearted chaos agent who is, yes, lining his pockets, but also doing things to for the positive, whereas the critical race theory might be for the negative. For the positive, structurally alter the country. You know, he's trying to change things. He's trying to he's taking big swings, trying to do things for the better. I mean, and maybe they're not working. Maybe we'll look back and say the tariffs were a disaster. The war was I mean, I hope not, but maybe we will. But I think at least we'll be able to look back and say this dude was at bat, swinging, working, trying. Uh, you know, this was an animal. This was an animal, and he rejected critical race theory. There was the sole. So the argument for Trump is, from my perspective, he's a fighter. He's unconventional. What you lose in terms of moral authority, you gain in pragmatism and flexibility. You know, he has things that he has in common with Bernie Sanders that make you go, huh? You know, Trump, the populism versus the social democrat. You know, the populist element. He's an interesting guy. He's a bit of a chameleon politically. So the argument for Trump is, for me, my argument for Trump is, hey, I just started really paying attention to politics for the first time. I'm coming out of law school. I studied critical race theory. I found it to be very controversial. And the material itself was very controversial. The remarks coming out of the mouths of my fellow classmates also, if not more controversial. So I came out of that freaked out, man. And I saw a guy fighting, a guy who I never respected. I never respected Donald Trump. Okay? I never thought he was a real builder. I never thought he was a real businessman. I thought it was a joke. I never watched The Apprentice. I didn't know anything about him. But I saw him come down that escalator. And I said to him, I remember walking around a grocery store talking to my dad across the country. And I said, Dad, you know, my dad is horrified by Trump, completely horrified by Trump to this day. I said, you know, obviously I don't support the statement I heard Trump make today, but there's something here. There's something here. So my argument for Trump is he's a fighter who supports common sense policies. We can't have a wide open, totally borderless country. I mean, that's insane. Okay. Certain things that sound common sense, we have to enforce the law. I don't want to get into a cultural, I don't want to get controversial here, but there are certain things that sound common sense, and they might sound to someone oppressive and mean and even life threatening, but they're common sense. Okay, for example, Trump, as far as I know, doesn't call for the eradication of transgender people. He doesn't call for the elimination of access to hormones. He's calling for protections for women in sports and women's spaces. And I don't have super hardened views on these topics, by the way. I probably would lean into the Trump view on these topics, which would call for common sense, protecting traditional women's spaces. Okay, so what I would say is, to get on a tangent, you have to be fair to everybody, including women. So if we're going to say that transgender people are here and they're here to stay and they're part of society, okay, we got to find out how to do that. And that might not mean putting a sticker on every bathroom that says all gender. It might mean creating more bathrooms. It might mean, I don't know what it means, but we have to be mindful and we have to do it slowly if we're going to do it. And so I can't say that I'm, you're compassionate for every single person. I believe trans people exist. They have real conditions. They are who they are. And I believe they should be supported. But when you have a kid under 18, that's where you go, well, shit, what do you do in that situation? And so I don't have a huge problem erring on the side of let's wait till you're 18. That's where I'm at now, okay? A lot of compassion, a lot of love, a lot of dialogue that needs to happen. But, right now, I'm okay with a line at 18, keeping women's sports separate. Let's talk about this and let's do this meaningfully and intentionally. but it's a terribly um, weighty issue. Right? And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about issues that cut to the core of what it means to be human, what it means to be, forget American. So when I talk about an ideological civil war, to expand on that, it's also a time in life where there are just all these new ideas. I mean, not that, okay, transgender is not necessarily a new idea, but our society is being asked to change drastically. And you can't blame people for having a reaction to it. So the appeal to Trump is, hey, he's reasonable, he's tough, but he does have a heart, and he understands on the social front there is an attack, an unfair and unwarranted attack on American culture, and it needs to be repelled. And by the way, on the economic stuff, because that's not really my bag, that's more of his bag, even though he's not a great businessman in my mind. Maybe he probably knows more than I do. He's been reading the news more than I do. So he probably has some good ideas up his sleeve economically. He surrounds himself with interesting people, reputable people. Interesting. So I like it. To me, MAGA, the new Trump, voting for him in 2024 for the first time was about saying, wait a minute, let's forgive his sins. Let's look at the positives. He's fighting a strong battle. Some people call it a spiritual battle, definitely an ideological battle. I think he's on the right side of that battle. So, and I think the other side is not. And so for that reason, I'm going to support him. And now that I'm into it, how many months into it? A year and a half, 2 years into it. And we're in the middle of a storm. We're not in the eye of the storm. We're in the storm. There are some troubles. And I'm just not ready to abandon him so quickly. I'm not ready to pull the plug. This was a long, slow process for me to get here. And there are foundational issues beyond even something as serious as the war in Iran and beyond even the economy. I mean, those are serious, deep issues, but they're not as deep as what is America and is it good? Jeez. So Trump's character is fascinating. It's horrendous, but it's also amazing. He's also hilarious. I mean, this guy is so funny, I can't even take it. Now, it's not nice when you call someone Miss Piggy. It's horrible. But there'll never be another one like him. And if the net result is positive and, all we had to deal with, I don't want to say all we had to deal with, but if the net result is very positive and we had to deal with his bullshit, I think it's worth it. I think it's majorly worth it. So that's what I'm praying for. I'm going to, and look, when I say I'm going to reassess before 2028, look, there is no reason to think that I would go back to voting for Democrats ever again, really, the way things currently are. You have to keep an open mind, of course, and you can never say never. Plus, would this show be interesting at all if I said, I am now a Republican for life? Who the fuck would care? I love Vance. I love Rubio. I love DeSantis. I love almost every Republican. I mean, it's weird. You might say, I was a big Lindsey Graham fan. Found out. In hindsight, was Lindsey Graham my political hero? I've tweeted that before. And I meant it. I go, are you serious? Maybe. This guy was a hawk for the causes he believed in terms of foreign policy. Pretty sure he was a reasonable, moderate Republican economically, socially. So moderate as well, but believed in the basic principles and the basic goodness of America. And then, he's probably a traditionalist, right? In terms of critical race theory. This was my guy, I think. So I find myself definitely feeling like a Republican these days, but you got to keep an open mind because Trump is not a traditional Republican. There is this battle in the Republican Party. And so presidential races are always fascinating, but it'll be fascinating on the right to see, do they snap back from the MAGA bend into a more free market oriented approach? What lasting effect does Trump have? And on the left, of course, what's going on with the Democratic Socialists, which I'll talk about in just a minute after I do a quick thought or two on this Churchill lecture that I just listened to, which will be a good follow up to the bit about Trump's character. You know, Trump. So, so this Churchill thing, as you know, I've been listening to a lot of lectures on the Peterson Academy. I did a few on Nietzsche, and I talked about Nietzsche in my past couple podcast episodes. And I'll mention him again. You know, this idea of, you know, man should be great. You know, this quote that stuck with me, that all of human society is a detour to get to 6 or 7 great men. You know, of course, that it's not indicative of his entire philosophy, but there's a lot there, I think. So this idea of greatness and not being weak, you know, what is greatness? But that's one thing, but not being weak and being strong. And Trump is strong psychologically. So there's like, right? There's something, as I said last week about the comparison with Hitler and Trump in view of Nietzschean philosophy. I said, you know, there's something Nietzschean for sure about Trump. And I think there's something to admire about that strength. So Churchill, these lectures, so yeah, I loved that. So I decided to hop on a lecture series about Churchill. And this series is different, a lot more audience questions, a lot more random. I mean, it's amazing. This guy is you know, a wealth of knowledge, and to hear him just go off about this piece of writing that Churchill did and this story and this piece of the war, you know, it's amazing and invaluable, but it's definitely, I'm not sure really what I'm learning, you know, it's not really formulaic, which is fine, but it's different. But what am I learning? I'm learning about that Churchill, you know, was called a great man by many people, even though many of his decisions were viewed as failures and horrible. He was a killer. He, you know, but he was a hard worker. He was a striver. He didn't he thought it was unseemly to honor himself. So he was not like Trump. So he was like Trump in the sense that he was determined to make history, right? He was determined to be a great man. But he didn't engage in self-flattery. In fact, the opposite. So it sounds like he had much more it sounded like he had his ego much more in control. He was an amazing writer, apparently an author. And from what I've gathered so far, it's just the power of words and speeches and the power of conviction and the power of love for country and the power of love for reason. And, you know, he was a liberal at one point, he was a conservative at one point. So the power of being flexible and, you know, being able to switch your political identity. There's a lot. I mean, you know, what else to say about him? Well, you know, he did a lot of things that were amazing. He saved a lot of lives. He cost them, you know, he lost a lot of lives. But everywhere he went, people recognized his greatness, his genius, his in battle. He studied battle. Um, and it's been a good lecture series, but I'm kind of light on the specifics. What else to say about him? Oh, I have one quote that really stuck with me. And this says a lot about Churchill, I think. I suppose it does. From the professor, paraphrasing Churchill, at a time where he was talking about Churchill's reaction to democratic socialism or socialism. You know, he was strongly against it. So I see in Churchill this picture that's being painted, a moderate, basically, a moderate who loves his country, who's bold, who ain't afraid to shake things up, who loves freedom. That's me, man. I think that might be Trump too. So with respect to this rising specter of socialism, he was quoted, or paraphrased at least, as saying, if the government controls the means of living, I think the professor meant to say the means of production, but same thing, right? If the government controls the means of living, what independence do you have to control the government? And that really hits it on the head. It's really about, how do we want to organize society? Who's in control? Are you sovereign in your own body? That's what the libertarians say when they want to say, well, let's test your political theory. Do you control your body? Yeah, okay. Well, then you control what you create with your body. And then it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, That's why I say I'm like a classical liberal, because as an artist too, as a wannabe artist, I mean, I'm not good, but I know what it's like to create something, a song, a little thing. And damn, if that took off and got, published and made a lot of money, well, not because purely I want money, but I would want the ownership rights of that. That's mine, man. I made it. If I built a house and I sold it, well, that's my right. That's where, that's where you start realizing, hey, maybe I'm more of a classical liberal than I realized. I believe in property rights. I really do. And we should all be sovereign. We should all have personal accountability of our lives. And if we all take care of ourselves, then we should all be able to thrive. And why would we need socialism? Capitalism would work. And if there are any, abusive concentrations of power in the market or abusive distortions, well, then you have a minimal government that would come along and make a reasonable regulation and take care of it. And then back to the default mode of letting people innovate and not having government as the savior of your life. This is my place. I go, wow, I think I'm a Republican these days. Fuck. Maybe even MAGA? I don't know, but I don't think I'm a Democrat anymore. I could call myself independent, but that's kind of a coward ways out. I'm a registered independent. I've been a registered independent since 2012. I was a Democrat when I voted for Obama in '08. And then I remember, I just don't like being part of big groups. And especially then. I mean, now that I'm more socialized and I have a wife, I don't mind. Going to Costco is less of a hellish experience than it might have been in years past. But when I was younger, it's get the fuck away from crowds. I don't want to be around anybody. I don't want to be in this party. I don't want to be in that party. I'm an independent motherfucker. And I remain that way, registered. So, but I'm a Republican, man. I'm voting for Republicans for the foreseeable future. I voted for Trump. I voted for Republicans any opportunity I've had since then in local elections. It's just in primaries. It's just too important, and I feel that way. That's just where I'm at. So the show is no longer called Searching for Political Identity, kind of for that reason. Ongoing exploration of who am I? What do I believe in? What kind of philosophies do I subscribe to? Who do I think humans are? What is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of society? What is the purpose of government? This is where I am now, but I continue to explore these questions. So last bullet point of the day, let me address this question of democratic socialism in a very small and perhaps terribly done way. Democratic socialism, what is it? Why is it on the rise? Well, the question is, what is it? I mean, because if it's just socialism if it's just a cute name for socialism, well, then we have to ask, what is socialism? And socialism is merely a transitional phase to communism. So, look, I mean, there's the Communist Manifesto that has the 10 basic pillars, and that's probably the better definition of what communism actually is. But the simple way people define communism is the government, or the public, rather. Let's see. The public, communal, ownership of the means of production, right? Communal. So not even government. So socialism is the transitional phase where you take all the ownership, the means of ownership away from the people and the private industry. You give it all to the government, and the government will run it socially. We'll do socialism until such a point where that can wither away. The government structure can wither away entirely, and you have just this publicly run communistic structure that serves everyone equally. So socialism is the government ownership of the means of production, right? Whereas communism is the genuinely socially communal ownership of the means of production. So is democratic socialism just socialism? In which case it's a transition to communism? And I'll even be generous. I'll say is the argument that it's a no, it's not a transition phase. Yes, that's what it is. It's the government, the democratically elected government is going to operate society as if it owns all the means of production. It's going to be a total 180 from from life as you know it, from private property, from capitalism. But we're not ever going to try to shed the government structure. This is just what it's going to be. So theoretically, you could vote us out. Okay. So, okay, like, is that what it is? But as I'm thinking about that, I'm going, but that's not feasible. You can't elect people to come in and just take control over the means of production and then say, but you can vote us out in 4 years. I mean, that just sounds by definition permanent. You know, it doesn't sound easy to just toggle back and forth there. So, so is democratic socialism just socialism? Okay. And so I Googled it. So one of my followers said, well, you could look it up. Okay. Well, I'm trying to tease a podcast here as I'm asking questions on X, you know? So they provided the link to the platform and I looked it up. And it's basically calling for a worker run society. A worker run society. And now as I say that, I'm thinking, did I miss anything in my definition of communism and socialism? Maybe I should have said communism is a society where the means of ownership are owned by a community of workers, the working class. Okay, that's an important clarification. The working class, very important clarification. And socialism would be democratic governance of the working class, by the working class. Okay? So if you elect people to become who are democratic socialists and they say, okay, we're going to turn all of the private industry over to the government, we're going to run it democratically. Again, do you really have a chance of kicking them out of power? Again, I just don't see how you could toggle between that. So you contrast that with, you know, so my point on socialism, okay, no, sorry, going back and forth a little bit. So what is it? Is it that? Well, their website says you will democratically elect us, and we will run the government, you know, from the perspective of the working class. And so it's kind of vague, of course. They don't list everything out, the DSA. They say, we support local chapters and this and that. But look, you have to find out, what is it really? Because if what it's about is changing the country and taking ownership of the means of production, then that is just contrary to everything we know. That works, that makes sense. Okay, so hold on. I've wandered a little bit here. This is what happens when you go live. So just give me a second to regain my train of thought, okay? I appreciate it. Talking about the rise of democratic socialism. Yes, thank you. Here's my thing. Because we don't know what it is. What is it? Maybe it's not full-blown socialism, but it probably is. But maybe it's not, okay? Either way, here's my point. I don't have an obsession with the working class. Now, I admit that, am I part of the working class? I would say yes, for sure. But also, I come from a relatively privileged background, for sure. And I've had no shortage of opportunities in my life. So I want to acknowledge that I come from a place of privilege. And maybe if I didn't, I'd have a different reaction. Maybe if I, you know, came from a family that had it even harder, I would be in favor of a working class run society. But to be honest with you, from where I stand, in all my life experience, good or bad, limited or not, I think about this and I go, why the fuck would I want the guy working at Best Buy running my government? No disrespect to the guy working at Best Buy. Like, that's me. You know? Why would I want me working? Why would I want me in charge? You know, why would I care about that? Why don't I just focus on what are the principles of our society? What are the principles of success in life? Are they aligned? Yeah, I think they have a pretty big overlap. That's great. So let's just live, baby. Let's just vote people in. Let's just live in a democracy, a constitutional republic that is also partially a democracy. Let's have good rules and regulations that are reasonable. But let's not condemn capitalism. Let's not condemn wealthy people because they play an incredibly important part in the thriving of our country and the uplifting of the country and people in the world out of poverty. Let's work together. Let's not try to radically redo anything. It's working, for goodness sake. And so the only piece to that is, am I missing something fundamentally important about the plight of the working class in America? Is it that bad? Is the $20 burrito, in college, is the affordability of a home. And so there may be something there. So let's get into that real quick. So what is democratic socialism? But why is it on the rise? That's also an interesting question. Well, perhaps for the average person in America, things are expensive. And if you don't have a real good job like I do, and you weren't fortunate, and you don't have a great supportive family that set you up for success, and you married into a wife that has a supportive family, and she also has a great job, it's like, if you're not that lucky, then maybe the $20 and burritos are $20, and you can't buy anything for $1 at McDonald's anymore, and you can't buy a home, BlackRock, all of that. Well, then it's obvious why the Democratic Socialists are making inroads. And so that is a lingering question of, are we at a point in society where we have a buildup of corporate abuses or kinks in the market that justify government intervention? Maybe. So the way I think about it is, with the free trade agreements, which I don't know if I'm for or against them. I'm not smart enough. I'm just saying, it seems like we made these free trade agreements. We sent all these jobs overseas, and all of a sudden, the quality of life in America has gone to shit for the middle class. And now they're pissed, and they elected Trump the first time. They even got a guy like me to jump on the bandwagon and vote for him the second time. And so they view Trump as of course, a fix the problem, and he's promised to. And look what he's doing with the tariffs. And maybe they're a joke, maybe they're failing, maybe they're not. I don't know, but he's trying. And so maybe democratic socialism is the answer. Maybe you need to have democratic socialism for a period of time. I'm just thinking out loud, by the way. Maybe because I've thought this before. So if the problem is all the jobs went away, and I don't know if that's the problem, but assuming it is the problem, well, Trump's trying to bring them back. Maybe it's working, maybe it's not. But if it's not working, maybe we have to do like a democratic socialism where the government, because they fucked up and sent all the jobs overseas, has like an obligation or a moral duty to provide, to basically be a socialist country for a period of time until which we can wean off of it and go back to normal. That sounds like unlikely, right? Also unlikely to just be able to undo. So we seem to be in a pickle. Trump's trying to encourage investment, and I love that. He thinks outside the box. I love that. I don't know if his policies are smart, stupid, if they're going to work or not in the long run. But I know he's thinking outside the box, and I know he loves this country, and that's why I've supported him up until this very moment. He still has my support. People have said, it's funny, in the Churchill lecture, I guess in the parliament, in the British system, you can call an election at any time. I guess it's more regular now, but back in the day, they would just call an election. So if America had a system where the president or whoever could just call an election at any time, the citizens, like, you and me, I would be much more focused every day on the political. I would say, No, I have to be ever ready to reevaluate my political views because, you know, an election could happen at any moment. It's my duty. But we have these timed elections. And so I have the luxury of saying, well, I'm going to just kick back and give them more time. Look, I'm going to get a lot of shit for choosing to do that. Some people are going to say, great job. You're so wise, Brian, coming, crossing the aisle, voting for him in 2024, despite all the negative coverage and all the bullshit, and you're still supporting him. Good for you. Look, who knows what's right? All I know is that I do love this country, man. I love America. I just love the American flag and what it represents and the idea. The idea. I'm not saying America is only an idea, that it's not a nation of people, but it is partially an idea, and it's a really good idea. And I love it. And that is basically the main reason why I do this podcast. We live in an interesting time, definitely a big battle going on ideologically. And I feel like I have something to give, something to offer. So appreciate y'all listening. Thank you so much. And I will see you next week. I don't think I have any topics planned out yet. I have several people who want to guest on the show. I have an old friend who was an amazing guest when I had him on years ago. So I'm trying to figure out who my first guest is going to be now that I'm back doing the podcast. But I'll figure something out. And I think next weekend I'm out of town actually. So I'll squeeze something in either in a couple days or 10 days or so. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a good one. Bye.